Intestinal tract, part 2, esophagus. Esophagus is a short tube connecting mouth to the stomach and is around 25 centimeters in length. The esophagus does not produce digestive enzymes, but it secretes large amount of mucus that acts as a lubricant, ensuring the smooth transit of food, the bolus, from the pharynx to the stomach. The structure of esophagus suits its function. Esophagus can be broadly divided into three regions: the top cervical part, the neck region, then the thoracic part, and the chest region or in the thoracic cavity, and from the thoracic cavity it pierces the diaphragm and re-enters the abdominal cavity and the abdominal part. The esophagus is opened or closed at both ends by two sphincters. The food enters the mouth, it is chewed, mixed with the saliva, and made into a bolus, and it will be swallowed after the deglutition impulse. So when the deglutition impulse starts, the upper esophageal sphincter opens, it stretches the esophagus, and the bolus enters the esophagus. Immediately after the bolus enters the esophagus, the upper esophageal sphincter closes. It prevents regurgitation of food into the pharynx and mouth. The transit time of food through the esophagus varies according to factors such as age. As you age, it will take longer time. Health and the nature of food consumed, but is typically 6 to 15 seconds. Then the food moves down the esophagus and reaches the lower end of the esophagus, and there is the lower esophageal sphincter. It is also known as cardiac sphincter because of its proximity to the heart. The lower esophageal sphincter controls the movement of the bolus into the stomach. It prevents a regurgitation of highly acidic gastric juice into the esophagus. You know that the pH of the gastric content is quite low, is sometimes pH 2. So if the low pH content reaches the esophagus, it causes chest burning. That is what we call chest burning. So the burning sensation we feel in the chest. This is prevented by the lower esophageal sphincter. But a variety of conditions, for example, hiatus hernia, can lead to poor closure of the lower esophageal sphincter and result in acid reflux. Esophageal wall, as I said before, the wall of the esophagus suits this function. Is composed of 4 layers: the mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, and adventitia. Unlike the remainder of the gastrointestinal tract, the esophagus has no serosa. All other part of the gastrointestinal tract has 4 layers: mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, and serosa. Here, instead of serosa, there is an adventitia layer is there. So, as I said before, the mucosa, that is the innermost layer of gastrointestinal tract. It is made up of 3 layers: the epithelium, lamina propria, and the muscularis mucosa. The mucosa surrounds the lumen within the digestive tube. This is the lumen of the digestive tube. It is surrounded by the mucosa. This layer comes in direct contact with the food. Epithelium is the innermost layer of the mucosa. So the mucosal wall, the mucosal part of the wall, has so many projections into the lumen. As a result, the cross section of the esophagus, the lumen of the esophagus, is star-shaped. In the esophagus, the epithelium is stratified squamous epithelium. It's appearance something like this. It is non-keratinized, and it helps in the protection of the esophagus. Lamina propria is a layer of connective tissue within the mucosa. It is more cellular compared to other connective tissue in human body. So some of the cells has a mucus secretion function. Muscularis mucosa is thin layer of smooth muscles towards the outside of this mucosal layer. Then comes the second layer, the submucosa. The submucosa consists of a dense and irregular layer of connective tissue. This is a dense and irregular layer of connective tissue with blood vessels and lymphatic vessels. And nerves branching into the mucosa is also there. It contains the submucosal plexus and meanderic nervous plexus, situated on the inner surface of the muscular layer. Then the muscular layer. The muscular layer is also known as muscularis propria. This layer outside the submucosa consists of two layers of muscles. One circular layer, the inner layer, and outside the circular layer there is a layer of longitudinal muscles. So the muscle of the inner layer is arranged in circular rings around the tract, whereas the muscle of the outer layer is arranged longitudinally. Between the two muscle layers are the mesenteric and submucosal plexus. Submucosal plexus and the meanderic plexus are seen in between the muscular layers. The rate of peristalsis is modulated by the autonomic nervous system. The coordinated contractions of these layers results in peristalsis and propels the food through the tract. The contraction of the circular as well as the longitudinal layer, controlled by the autonomic nervous system, causes peristaltic movement of the wall of the esophagus and causes the movement of food down the esophagus. Then the outermost layer is adventitia. The outermost layer of esophagus consists of several layers of connective tissue. This structure consists of connective tissue covered by a simple squamous epithelium, which reduces the frictional forces during digestive movement. The digestive movement in esophagus is peristalsis. The mesentery attaches the esophagus to the posterior abdominal wall and is formed by the double fold of peritoneum. It helps in storing fat and allowing blood vessels, lymphatics, and nerves to supply the esophagus, among other functions. So the blood vessels, lymphatics, and nerves reaches the esophageal wall through the mesentery. It is a double fold of peritoneum. Muscles in esophagus. The upper third of the esophagus is dominated by striated muscles. The middle one third of the esophagus has got striated as well as smooth muscles, and the lowermost layer part has got only smooth muscles. The sphincters. As I said before, two sphincters, upper esophageal sphincter and lower esophageal sphincter, they act like strings in closing channels. The upper esophageal sphincter is located at the level of the cricoid cartilage. Normally remain closed except during the act of swallowing. The lower esophageal sphincter is around 3 to 4 centimeters wide towards the lower end of the esophagus, and this lower esophageal sphincter part, pass through the opening in the diaphragm. This part, opening in the diaphragm, called the diaphragmatic hiatus. The lower esophageal sphincter is maintained in tension at all times, except in response to a descending peristaltic wave, when at this point the sphincter relaxes and the food can move into the stomach from the esophagus. The lower esophageal sphincter has also got an important role protecting the esophagus from the reflex of gastric contents with the changes in the body position, like when we lie down, the food will not come back into the esophagus. Bolus is pushed to the esophagus by the esophageal peristaltic contraction originated in the pharynx. So this peristaltic contraction is originated in the pharynx. An advancing peristaltic verb, the movement of the peristaltic wave down the esophagus creates a pressure gradient. So before the food bolus or at the back of the bolus, the pressure is higher. So the bolus will be pushed forward and downwards towards the stomach. Transport of materials through the esophagus takes approximately 10 seconds, between 5 to 15 seconds, depending upon the health, age of the person, and the type of food. When the bolus arrives at the junction with the stomach, the lower esophageal sphincter relaxes and the bolus enters the stomach. The peristaltic movement as well as the blood supply to the esophagus is controlled by nervous system as in the case of any other organ. The esophagus, like the rest of the viscera, receives dual sensory innervation, the parasympathetic and sympathetic innervations, but more properly based on the actual nerves. The vagal nerves and the spinal nerves supply the esophagus. The motor innervations of esophagus is predominantly via the vagus nerve. Parasympathetic innervations of esophagus regulates glandular secretion, the mucus secretion, then the internal width of the blood vessels in the esophagus, and the activity of striated and smooth muscles. The sympathetic nerve supply regulates blood vessel constriction, contractions of the esophageal sphincters, relaxation of the muscular wound, and increase in glandular and peristaltic activity. The ganglia that lie between the longitudinal, this is the ganglias lying between the circular and longitudinal muscle layers of the tunica muscularis form the meandric or Auerbach's plexus. Auerbach's plexus regulates contraction of the outer muscle layers. The ganglia that lies in the submucosa, these ganglia that lies in the submucosa forms the submucosal or Meissner's plexus. Meissner's plexus regulates secretion and the peristaltic contraction of the muscularis mucosa. A network of fibers connects these two plexi. So in short, the structure of esophagus suits its function.